She was 6 years old, standing in the snow with a basket of winter flowers, hoping someone would see her. He was rich, lonely, and walking past. One quiet choice changed both of their lives forever, and neither of them knew it yet. Snow drifted down Holloway City like powdered sugar, soft and almost kind, coating sidewalks and window ledges with a fragile glow. Holiday lights flickered along Argent Avenue, reflecting in shallow puddles where boots passed in a hurry. The city felt dressed for celebration, warm coats, polished shoes, laughter escaping open restaurant doors. Near the edge of that brightness stood Leora, 6 years old, small enough to be overlooked by rushing crowds. She held a shallow wicker basket close to her chest. Inside lay a handful of wild daisies, white petals, yellow centers tied carefully with thin twine. Not store-bought, not perfect, but chosen with care. Her red coat was clean but faded, the cuffs frayed from seasons it had outlived. A gray knit cap slipped over one ear, barely containing strands of dark hair. Leora's cheeks were pink from the cold, but her green eyes stayed alert, scanning faces, shoes, hands, searching not for pity, but for possibility. She stepped forward when someone slowed, offering the basket with both hands. "Winter flowers," she said softly. "They last." Most people didn't hear her. Others smiled politely and moved on. Leora didn't chase. She had learned that hope worked better when it stayed calm. She shifted her weight, blowing gently into her gloves to warm her fingers. The daisies trembled slightly as snowflakes landed among the petals, melting into tiny drops of silver. Across the street, the doors of LeClaire House, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, swung open. Warm laughter spilled out, rich and careless, followed by 4 men in tailored coats. They looked full of food, of comfort, of the kind of ease Leora recognized from a distance. She hesitated, then squared her shoulders. Tonight, she decided she would be brave quietly. Leora took one small step toward the light. The men paused on the sidewalk, still laughing about something that had happened over dessert. Their voices carried easily through the cold air, confident, loud, unbothered. One of them noticed the basket first. "Well, that's new," he said with a crooked smile, nodding toward Leora. "Didn't expect a flower stand tonight." Leora lifted the basket slightly as she had practiced. "They're winter daisies," she said. "They grow even when it's cold." Another man leaned in, squinting at the flowers, not cruel, just careless. "You picked those yourself?" he asked, amused. "That's ambitious," the group chuckled. Not sharply, not loudly, but enough. Leora felt the familiar tightening in her chest, not fear exactly, but the weight of being discussed instead of addressed. She stayed still, hands steady. "There for anyone," she added, "if you want." One man shook his head, smiling as if at a clever anecdote. $5 for wildflowers," he said lightly. "That's confidence." They didn't step closer. They didn't touch the basket. They simply lingered, curiosity satisfied, already half turned away. To them, this was a moment, brief, forgettable, harmless. To Leora, it was the space where hope either landed or fell through. She lowered the basket slightly, preparing to step back when a new voice entered the space, calm, measured, unmistakably present. "I'll take them." The men turned. Standing a few steps behind them was a man in a dark overcoat and charcoal scarf. He wasn't imposing, but there was a stillness about him that quieted the sidewalk. "I said," he repeated gently, "I'll take all of them." Leora looked up, surprised not by the words, but by the way he was already looking at her, not past her. The man stepped forward, closing the distance without urgency. He pulled out his wallet and slid a single bill, free, $50 crisp and uncreased. He held it out to Leora, not the group. "For the flowers," he said. "If that's okay with you." Leora blinked. The amount felt unreal. She nodded once, careful, then accepted the bill with both hands, as if it might vanish if she didn't. The men shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat. Another shrugged, suddenly eager to leave. No one argued. The moment had changed. and they could feel it. "That's enough," the man said, not harshly, not loudly, just final. The group moved on, laughter gone, coats pulled tighter against the cold. The city swallowed them without comment. Only then did the man kneel, bringing himself level with Leora's eyes. "I'm Gideon," he said. "And you did nothing wrong." Leora hugged the basket to her chest, daisies rustling softly. "They last," she repeated, as if explaining something important. Gideon smiled, not wide, not forced. "They do." Snow fell between them in slow, patient flakes. Cars passed. Life continued. But the sidewalk felt different now, quieter, steadier. "It's cold tonight," Gideon said, rising and offering a respectful distance. "There's a cafe on the corner. They make excellent hot chocolate. Extra marshmallows." Leora hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the street, the exits, the patterns she trusted. Then she looked back at him. "Okay," she said softly. "Just warm." Gideon nodded. "Just warm." As they turned toward the amber-lit cafe, Leora glanced once more at the city behind her, the noise, the hurry, the places that rarely noticed her. For the first time that night, she didn't feel invisible. The cafe on the corner glowed like a pocket of warmth folded into the night. Amber lights softened the windows, and the scent of cocoa and cinnamon drifted into the cold. As Gideon held the door open, Leora hesitated for half a breath, then stepped inside. Heat wrapped around her immediately. She blinked, shoulders lifting, then slowly dropping, as if her body needed permission to relax. The noise here was gentle cups clinking, a low murmur of conversation, a soft song playing somewhere above it all. Gideon chose a small table near the window. He pulled out a chair for her, not making a show of it, just making it easy. 2 hot chocolates, he told the barista. Extra marshmallows. Leora slid into the chair, hands tucked beneath her arms. She watched everything, the menu board, the steam rising from mugs, the way people leaned toward one another when they spoke. Places like this felt temporary to her, like a picture you were allowed to look at, but not step into. When the mug arrived, she wrapped her hands around it carefully. The warmth seeped into her fingers, slow and steady. She took a small sip, eyes widening just a little. "Good?" Gideon asked. She nodded. "It tastes safe." The word surprised them both. Gideon smiled softly and didn't ask her to explain. Snow traced thin lines down the window beside them. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't heavy. It felt respectful, like space being held. "My favorite flower is the daisy," Leora said suddenly. "They grow where people don't expect them to." Gideon leaned back slightly. "That sounds like a strength." She considered that. Then quietly, "They don't need much." Leora finished her drink slowly, savoring each sip as if it were something to remember later. Gideon noticed how she placed the mug back exactly where it had been, careful not to leave a ring on the table. "What do you do with the flowers when it gets too cold?" he asked gently. She shrugged. "I save some. I dry them." Her fingers traced an invisible line on the tabletop. "They last longer that way." Gideon nodded. That makes sense. He didn't ask where she slept. Didn't ask why she was alone. He let her choose the shape of the conversation. After a moment, he said, "I live not far from here. I walk this street a lot. I'm glad I saw you tonight." Leora studied his face, not searching for kindness, but consistency. "People don't usually come back," she said, not accusing, just stating a fact she'd learned carefully. "I know," Gideon replied. "I'm trying to be better at that." She absorbed the words as if weighing them. Then she slipped off the chair, pulling her coat tighter. "I should go now," she said, "before it gets later." Gideon stood as well, giving her space. "Of course." At the door, Leora paused. Snow waited outside, patient as ever. She turned back, holding up the basket, now lighter, emptier. "Thank you," she said, "for stopping the noise." Gideon opened the door. "You didn't deserve it in the first place." She nodded once, and stepped into the night, her small figure quickly blending into the city's movement. Gideon watched until she was gone. Gideon's apartment was quiet when he returned, clean lines, neutral colors, nothing out of place. The kind of space designed for efficiency, not comfort. He set his coat down, removed his scarf, and stood still longer than usual. The flowers were still in his hand. He found a simple glass vase, filled it with water, and arranged the daisies carefully. They looked fragile against the wide kitchen counter, but somehow stubborn, two bright centers facing the ceiling lights. Gideon leaned on the counter, studying them. For years he had told himself that silence was peace, that order meant control. But tonight the apartment felt hollow in a way it never had before. He walked past the guest room, the one that stayed closed, untouched. A bed made by someone else long ago. A desk no one used. The door creaked slightly as he pushed it open. The room smelled faintly of linen and dust. It wasn't sad. It was waiting. Gideon stood there, hands in his pockets, and for the first time allowed himself to imagine laughter where there had only been echoes. Small shoes by the door, drawings taped crookedly to the wall. He shook his head, almost smiling at himself. One night, he murmured, just one. Back in the kitchen, he glanced again at the flowers. A single daisy had opened more fully, its petals stretching as if it had decided the place was acceptable. Gideon picked up his phone, checked the weather forecast. Heavy snow, dropping temperatures. Tomorrow he decided he would walk to the park. Not to fix anything. Just to see if a small girl with winter flowers was all right. Morning light stretched thin across Holloway Park, pale and brittle, as if the sun itself were uncertain about staying. Snow from the night before had hardened into a glassy crust, crunching softly beneath Gideon Vale's shoes as he crossed the familiar paths. He hadn't told himself what he was looking for. He only knew he needed to see the park the way he had that night, quiet, honest, unguarded. Then he saw her, near a flower bed wrapped in frost. Leora crouched low, her red coat dusted with snow. Her gray cap had slipped back, dark hair escaping in uneven strands. She was using her bare fingers to gently brush snow aside, careful not to damage whatever lay beneath. Gideon stopped. She blew on her hands once, twice, then went back to work, patient, methodical. The world could have been louder around her, but she moved as if inside a small circle of focus. "Hello, Leora," Gideon said softly, keeping distance. She looked up instantly, eyes wide with reflex. For a fraction of a second, her body tensed, ready to move. Then recognition softened her face. "Mr. Gideon," she said, surprised. "You came back." "I did," he replied. "I was hoping I'd find you." She studied him, then gestured to the ground. "Winter daisies," she explained. "They hide. You have to look carefully." Gideon knelt beside her, ignoring the cold seeping through his coat. "Can I help?" She considered, then shifted slightly to make room. They worked in silence. Snow, soil, breath turning white. Gideon noticed the small lines on her hands. Nothing dramatic, just signs of too much cold, too much responsibility. "You're not selling today?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Too cold. People stay inside." "Flowers don't," Gideon said. She smiled faintly. "No." When they found a single, stubborn bloom pushing through the frost, Leora's face lit up, not excitement, but quiet triumph. "They last," she said again. Gideon felt something tighten in his chest, not pain but recognition. The diner was small and unpretentious, with red vinyl booths and a bell above the door that chimed softly when they entered. Warmth rolled over them like a held breath finally released. Leora slid into the booth opposite Gideon, eyes darting around menus, coffee cups, the window fogging from the inside. She placed her hands on her lap, sitting very straight, as if afraid the moment might tip. "Pancakes?" Gideon asked. Her eyes lifted. "With real syrup, the real kind," he promised. When the plates arrived, steam rising in slow curls, Leora stared for a second too long. She picked up her fork carefully, cutting a piece smaller than necessary. Gideon watched without comment. After the first bite, something changed. Not dramatically, just a soft easing in her shoulders. She took another, slightly bigger this time. "They're good," she said, nodding as if confirming a theory. Gideon smiled. "I thought they might be." Between bites, he asked, "Do you come to the park every day?" "Most days," she replied. "It's quieter in the morning, and there are birds." "Do you have a favorite?" she thought. "The ones that stay in winter. They don't leave when it's hard." He nodded slowly. Outside the window, a news screen flickered on above the counter. A weather alert scrolled along the bottom. "Winter storm warning, heavy snow expected." Leora followed his gaze. "They say it'll be bad," she said. "I saw that," Gideon replied. "If it is, do you have somewhere warm?" She paused, fork hovering. "I usually find somewhere." The word usually hung between them, practical, practiced, too small for a child. Gideon leaned back slightly. "If the storm comes like they say," he said carefully, "I have a spare room. You could stay there, just until it passes." She looked at him, not afraid, not hopeful. Measuring. "You'd take me home?" she asked. "If you want," he said. "No pressure." Leora considered the pancakes, the window, the world beyond it. Then she nodded once. "I'll think about it," she said. They walked back to the park together, snow beginning to fall again, light at first, uncertain. Leora kicked at the powder with the toe of her boot, thoughtful. "I don't usually get offers," she said after a while. "I know," Gideon replied. "That's why it can wait." At the park gate, she stopped. "If it's really bad," she said slowly, "where would we meet?" "By the frozen fountain," Gideon answered. "At noon," she nodded. "Noon is good." They stood there a moment longer than necessary, neither quite ready to leave. "What if I don't come?" she asked, eyes fixed on the path. "Then I'll hope you're warm," Gideon said, "and I'll still be glad I met you." She absorbed that, then stepped back. "Okay." As she turned to go, she added almost as an afterthought, "You kept your word last night." Gideon watched her disappear between the trees, red coat bright against the white. That evening, the storm warnings intensified. Wind howled against windows, snow piled faster than expected. Gideon checked his phone, then the clock. He set his alarm early, noon, frozen fountain. Outside, winter gathered its strength, and somewhere in the city, a small girl with winter daisies decided whether promises were places you could stand, or only words that faded with the snow. By late morning, Holloway City had vanished beneath white. Snow fell thick and relentless, erasing sidewalks, softening edges, turning familiar streets into something fragile and uncertain. Wind pressed against buildings like a question that wouldn't stop being asked. Gideon Vale stood at his apartment window, watching the storm swallow the city. His phone buzzed with alerts, offices closing, transit delays, warnings urging people to stay inside. Sensible advice. He checked the time. 11:12 a.m., he pulled on his coat anyway. The trip to the park took nearly an hour. What was usually a short walk became a careful negotiation with the weather, each step deliberate, each breath sharp with cold. By the time Gideon reached the park gates, snow clung to his shoulders and eyelashes. The park was empty. Trees stood frozen, their branches heavy with white. The fountain lay buried, its edges barely visible beneath drifts. Noon passed quietly without ceremony. Gideon's chest tightened. He scanned the paths, the benches, the familiar places where Leora liked to sit. Nothing. Any reasonable person would have stayed indoors on a day like this. He turned to leave, then stopped. Near a large oak half hidden by snow was a shape that didn't belong to the storm. A small structure of branches leaned together, carefully arranged. Not random. Intentional. Gideon approached slowly. Inside the makeshift shelter, wrapped in her red coat, was Leora. Curled inward, knees, drawn close, eyes lifted toward him, as if she had been waiting exactly where she said she would be. "You came," she said simply. "Of course I did," Gideon replied, kneeling. "It's noon." Snow had dusted her cap, her lashes, her shoulders. Her hands were tucked under her arms, but she was calm, cold, but calm. "I said I'd be here," she added. "A promise is a place you can stand." Something broke open in Gideon's chest. Not panic, not fear, but a sudden, overwhelming respect. "You don't have to stay out here," he said gently. "Not today." She looked at the storm, then back at him. "You said there was a room." "There is," Gideon said. "And it's warm." She nodded, once reached for his hand, and trusted him with her weight. The wind picked up as they left the park, snow driving sideways, now stinging exposed skin. Gideon adjusted his scarf around Leora's shoulders, making sure it was snug without smothering. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded. "I walk a lot." They moved slowly, carefully. The city felt distant, hushed, as if holding its breath. Cars crept along the streets like shadows, tires crunching through slush. After a block, Gideon stopped. "We can go faster this way," he said, lowering himself slightly. "If you're okay with it." She hesitated, then climbed onto his shoulders, small hands gripping his coat for balance. She was lighter than he expected. Too light. From up high, Leora watched the city differently. "It looks softer," she said. "Storms do that," Gideon replied. They changed things for a while. The building appeared through the snow like a promise kept. The doorman nodded without questions, opening the door wide. Warmth rushed out to meet them. Inside the apartment, Gideon set Leora down gently. She stood very still, eyes wide, taking in the space, the lights, the quiet, the order. It wasn't extravagant. It was simply safe. "You can sit," Gideon said, "or stand, or whatever feels right." She took a cautious step forward, then another. "I'll make something warm," he continued. "Soup, maybe." She nodded. "That sounds good." Gideon filled the bathtub, testing the water carefully. He left clean towels and a soft t-shirt folded neatly on the counter. "You can change in here," he said, stepping back. "I'll be in the kitchen." When she emerged later, hair damp, wrapped in clothes that were too big but unmistakably clean, her cheeks held a faint color he hadn't seen before. They ate soup together at the kitchen table. Leora blew on each spoonful, savoring the warmth, as if committing it to memory. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, the world grew quieter. The storm lasted 3 days. Snow sealed the city in white, closing schools, emptying streets, pressing life inward. For Gideon and Leora, time changed shape. Mornings began with pancakes, slightly uneven, always warm. Leora insisted on helping, standing on a chair to stir batter with careful concentration. She laughed once when flour dusted Gideon's sleeve, then looked surprised at the sound, as if laughter had arrived unannounced. Afternoons were slower. Books from Gideon's shelves came down one by one. He read aloud at first. Then she read to him, halting, determined, proud of each finished sentence. She drew constantly. Flowers bloomed across scrap paper notebooks, even sticky notes. She taped one small daisy to Gideon's desk. "So you don't forget," she said. "I won't," he replied. At night, Gideon showed her the spare room. Fresh sheets, an extra blanket, a small lamp left on, not bright, just enough. "It's yours," he said, "for as long as you need it." She touched the bedspread carefully. "It's real," she murmured. "Yes," Gideon said. "It is." On the third morning, the storm finally eased. Sunlight slipped through the windows, pale but hopeful. Leora stood by the glass, watching snow fall from branches in soft cascades. "Does this place go away when the weather changes?" she asked. Gideon came to stand beside her. "No," he said. "Places don't disappear just because the storm ends." She thought about that for a long moment. Then she smiled. Spring did not arrive all at once in Holloway City. It came carefully in small permissions. Snow melted into thin silver lines along the sidewalks. Buds appeared on branches that had seemed dead only days before. The world was learning how to soften again. So was Leora. Her first day of school began quietly. Gideon walked beside her, matching his steps to hers without realizing it. She wore a simple navy jacket, clean sneakers, and a small backpack that looked slightly too big for her shoulders. Inside were pencils, a notebook, and one pressed daisy tucked between the pages. The school building was brick and warm-looking, with wide windows and a small courtyard filled with planter boxes waiting for spring. Leora paused at the gate. "You don't have to stay," she said, not looking up. "I want to," Gideon replied, "but I can wait over there if you'd rather." She considered, then nodded. "You can wait." Inside the classroom, the teacher greeted her with a gentle smile and no unnecessary questions. Leora was shown a desk by the window. Sunlight touched the corner of it just enough. She sat carefully, hands folded, eyes alert. The room buzzed with quiet energy pencils scratching pages, turning the low hum of learning. When the teacher asked her name, Leora answered clearly. When asked what she liked to draw, she said flowers that grow in hard places. By lunchtime, she had spoken to 2 other children. By the end of the day, she had smiled without checking the door first. Gideon watched her emerge from the building, backpack bouncing lightly. When she saw him, her face brightened in a way that startled him, not loud joy, but certainty. "That was fast," she said. "Too fast?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just right." Days settled into rhythm. Gideon arranged the paperwork properly, temporary care school records, medical checkups, all done openly, legally, patiently. Nothing rushed, nothing hidden. At home, Leora claimed the spare room slowly, a drawing taped to the wall, books stacked neatly by the bed, shoes aligned by the door. One evening, as Gideon worked at the kitchen table, Leora sat nearby, coloring. "This place feels steady," she said. Gideon looked up. "That's good." She nodded, then added, "Steady means it won't tip right." He paused, then answered honestly, "It means we notice when it starts to." She accepted that. Outside, spring continued its careful work. Inside, something fragile and important was growing, rooted not in certainty but in care. The merger came quietly at first, then all at once. Late meetings, phone calls that stretched past dinner, emails that arrived with words like urgent and non-negotiable. Gideon tried to shield Leora from it, but time has a way of revealing itself. "I'll be late tonight," he said one afternoon, kneeling to her level. "But I'll be home." She nodded, coloring without looking up. "Okay." That evening, Tessa Hart arrived, bright smile, soft voice, a canvas bag filled with books and art supplies. She knelt immediately, meeting Leora's eyes without crowding her. "I hear you like drawing," Tessa said. Leora studied her, then nodded. "Flowers, perfect," Tessa replied. "I'm terrible at flowers. You can teach me." The evenings went smoothly. Dinner, homework, reading aloud. Tessa followed the rules Gideon set clearly, no surprises, no pressure, consistency above all. Still, something shifted. Mornings grew quieter. Leora ate breakfast carefully, methodically. Her drawings became smaller, more precise. One morning, Gideon noticed the red backpack tucked beneath her bed, not packed, just there. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "You're busy." "Yes," he said. "But that's not because of you." She nodded but didn't respond. One night, Gideon came home earlier than expected. Laughter drifted from the kitchen, Tessa's bright, Leora's softer, tentative. Relief washed over him, followed immediately by guilt. Later, as he tucked Leora in, she clung for a moment longer than usual. "You came back," she said. "I always do." She studied his face. "Do you ever wish you didn't have to?" The question landed softly but with weight. "No," Gideon said without hesitation. "I wish I were better at being everywhere that matters." She seemed satisfied for now. But the hours between his departures and returns stretched long, and in those hours old lessons whispered that people leave, that kindness can change shape, that staying is never guaranteed. Leora didn't say these things aloud. She simply watched more carefully. It was a Thursday morning when Gideon found the backpack. The apartment was quiet. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, touching the edges of the room. Gideon passed by Leora's door, intending only to check if she was awake. The door was open. Leora sat on the bed, folding her clothes with careful precision. The red backpack lay open beside her. Inside were her notebooks, the pressed daisy a small pouch of pencils. She froze when she saw him. "I wasn't," she began, then stopped. Gideon sat slowly on the edge of the bed. "Where are you going?" She looked down at her hands. "I don't know. Somewhere that doesn't need you to change things." A long silence followed, not empty but heavy with understanding. "You think you're a burden," Gideon said quietly. She nodded once. "You were fine before me." He shook his head gently. "I was existing." She finally looked up. In her eyes was not drama, not fear, just acceptance learned too early. "You hired someone to stay with me," she said. "You work late, you don't need extra weight." Gideon reached for the backpack and slowly closed it. "Leora," he said, steady and clear, "you are not extra weight. You are the reason this place became a home." She swallowed. "Homes don't keep people forever." "Some do," he replied. "Some are built by choosing to stay again and again." He placed the backpack under the bed, not hidden, just resting. "If I'm learning," he said, "it's because you're here. If I'm late, it's my mistake, not your fault." She studied his face, searching for cracks. Finding none. "You promise?" she asked. "I promise," Gideon said. "And when I mess up, I fix it. With you." Leora leaned forward, slowly resting her forehead against his shoulder. Not a hug, not yet, but she stayed. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the quiet decision being made in a small room with light blue walls. A decision not written down, but real all the same. The first thing Gideon noticed when he opened the door was the scent. Not perfume, not something expensive, something simple, green and clean like rain trapped in glass. He stepped inside and stopped. The apartment had changed, not in a careless way, not in chaos. It was still tidy, still respectful of space, but now it felt lived in. Small vases of wildflowers sat on the windowsill, the kitchen counter, the coffee table. A soft scatter of color against the once neutral room. On the refrigerator, drawings had multiplied. Not just flowers, little scenes, a park bench under snow, a mug with marshmallows, a lamp glowing in a small blue room. Beneath each picture, Leora had written words in careful, uneven letters. Safe. Warm. Here. In the center of the living room, taped neatly above the couch, hung a handmade banner made from folded paper strips and pressed petals. The letters were large and bright. Our home. Gideon's throat tightened before he could stop it. A small rustle came from behind the couch. "Surprised," Leora said, stepping out with a cautious smile that tried to look confident. She held a roll of tape like a trophy. Behind her, Tessa appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "She did most of it," Tessa said quickly. "I only helped with the banner and making sure the tape won't ruin your walls." Leora's smile wavered, as if she suddenly worried she'd done too much. Gideon walked forward slowly, looking at everything as if it might disappear if he blinked too hard. "You decorated," he said. Leora nodded. "You said I made it feel like a home," she explained, words careful and practiced. "So I thought, maybe I should make it more true." Gideon crouched, bringing himself to her level. "Leora," he said gently, "this is beautiful." Her eyes flicked across his face, scanning for the hidden criticism she expected from the world. Finding none, her shoulders loosened a fraction. "You like it?" she asked. "I love it," Gideon said, and meant it fully. You didn't just decorate. You gave this place a heart. A breath left Leora like she'd been holding it for days. Then she smiled, small but genuine. That night, Gideon insisted on dinner together. Not rushed. No laptop at the table. No phone in hand. He made simple pasta and let Leora sprinkle herbs like it mattered, because it did. Afterward, they sat on the couch under the banner. Leora leaned slightly against his side, not fully resting, just touching the way trust does when it's still learning its own weight. Tessa gathered her bag, smiling softly. "I'll head out," she said. "Text me if you need anything." "Thank you," Gideon said, not as a formality, like someone who understood what help really meant. When the door closed, silence settled in, not lonely this time. Full. Warm. Gideon walked Leora to her room. He paused at the doorway, taking in the little changes: a neatly placed book on her pillow, a pencil cup on the desk, a pressed daisy tucked into the corner of the mirror frame. Leora climbed into bed and pulled the blanket up carefully. "Gideon," she asked, voice quiet. "Yes, do you think—" She hesitated, eyes on the ceiling. "Do you think homes can choose people?" Gideon sat on the edge of the bed. "I think people choose each other," he said. "And then the home follows." She nodded slowly, absorbing the idea. He switched on the small lamp and left the door slightly open, like always. As he turned to go, the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the calm like a single clear note. Gideon's body went still. Leora sat up slightly. "Who is that?" Gideon forced his face into steadiness. "Probably a mistake," he said, though his chest already knew better. He walked to the door and opened it. A woman stood in the hallway with a leather folder in her arms. Her hair was pinned neatly back. Her expression was professional, not cold, not warm. Observant. "Mr. Vale?" she asked. "Yes. I'm Marin Cole, Department of Children's Services," she said evenly. "May we speak for a moment?" The apartment behind Gideon felt suddenly very quiet, as if even the banner had stopped breathing. Marin Cole stepped into the apartment with the calm precision of someone trained to notice details without dramatizing them. She didn't look for dirt like a detective. She looked for patterns: food in the kitchen, warmth in the rooms, signs of safety, signs of stability. Gideon closed the door gently behind her. "Thank you for coming in," he said, voice controlled. Marin nodded once. "I'll be direct," she replied. "We received an alert when a child was enrolled in school without standard guardianship documentation. That doesn't automatically mean wrongdoing. It means we review." Gideon's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in focus. "I understand." Her gaze moved past him toward the living room. She saw the banner, the drawings, the vases of flowers. A flicker of something softened in her eyes, brief, professional, quickly hidden. "You have someone else in the home?" Marin asked. "Yes," Gideon said. "Leora is here." Marin's tone remained gentle but firm. "May I meet her?" Gideon turned slightly. "Leora," he called, keeping his voice calm. "Can you come here for a moment, please?" A pause. Then soft footsteps. Leora appeared at the end of the hallway, wearing pajamas that were now truly hers, not borrowed. Her hair was brushed slightly damp from a shower. She held a small notebook against her chest, like a shield, not fear, just habit. Her eyes landed on Marin, and she went very still. Marin lowered herself slightly, not kneeling dramatically, just making her height less imposing. "Hello, Leora," she said. "I'm Marin." Leora didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked to Gideon's face, searching for a cue. Gideon gave her a tiny nod. "It's okay," he said. Marin noticed that exchange and didn't interrupt it. "That's a lovely banner," Marin said, nodding toward the living room. "Did you make it?" Leora's mouth tightened, as if she wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a test. Then she answered very quietly. "Yes, it's neat work," Marin said. "You took care." Leora said nothing, but her grip on the notebook loosened a fraction. Marin turned back to Gideon. "Mr. Vale, I'd like to speak with you privately for a few minutes. Gideon nodded. Of course. Then Marin added, and I'll need a brief private conversation with Leora as well. Standard procedure. It's not an accusation. It's to ensure she feels safe and heard. Gideon's chest tightened again, but he kept his voice steady. I understand. He looked to Leora. Would you like to sit in your room for a moment while I speak with Marin? You can take your notebook. Leora's eyes widened slightly at the word room, as if it mattered that it was hers. She nodded and slipped back down the hallway without a sound. In the kitchen, Gideon offered Marin coffee. She accepted, then opened her folder. Her questions were clear, structured, and respectful. How long has Leora been living here? What is the nature of your relationship? Have you begun legal steps toward guardianship? Does she attend school consistently? Does she have medical care? Gideon answered honestly. He explained their meeting, the storm, the spare room that turned into a routine, the school enrollment with temporary arrangements, the sitter, the plan to formalize everything properly. I should have moved faster, he admitted, but I did not want to disrupt her life with unstable transitions. I wanted to build stability first, then do the paperwork the right way. Marin listened without judgment. She took notes, not aggressively, just thoroughly. When Gideon finished, Marin closed her folder slowly. Based on what I've seen so far, she said, this appears to be a stable home. That matters. Relief rose in Gideon like warmth returning to cold hands. He didn't let it show too quickly. Marin continued, however, we can't leave this informal. The system requires legal clarity. I can help you begin temporary guardianship immediately followed by a supervision period and then adoption proceedings if appropriate. Gideon nodded. I'm ready. Marin held his gaze. Good. Then we worked together. She stood. Now I'll speak with Leora for a few minutes. You can wait in the living room. Gideon's instinct was to protest, not because he mistrusted Marin, but because he hated the idea of any door between him and Leora. Still, he forced himself to respect the process. He walked to the living room and sat beneath the banner. Our home hung above him like a quiet prayer. Minutes passed. 10 felt like a lifetime. He heard low voices, nothing sharp, nothing alarming, just conversation. Still, Gideon's hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. Finally, the kitchen doorway opened. Marin stepped out first. Leora followed behind her face, carefully. Neutral too, still too quiet, like a child trying to be good in a world that often measured goodness by how small you could make yourself. Marin turned to Gideon. Thank you, she said. I'll return in 2 weeks for a formal home visit. In the meantime, I'll email you the initial forms and the list of documents needed. Thank you, Gideon replied, voice steady. Marin paused at the door, then added softer now. This is a good direction. Keep it steady. When the door closed, Gideon turned immediately to Leora. Hey, he said gently. How are you feeling? Leora shrugged. Not dismissive, just overwhelmed. What did she ask you? Gideon asked, keeping his voice calm and open. Leora looked down. Things. What kind of things if you're nice, she said. If I like it here. If I want to stay. And what did you say? She finally lifted her eyes and Gideon saw something there. Quiet conflict, not fear, not panic. Something sharper. I said the truth, Leora whispered. Then she stepped back, hugging her notebook closer. Can I go to my room now? I'm tired. Gideon nodded immediately. Of course. But as Leora walked away, Gideon noticed something that made his stomach dip. She didn't look at the banner. Not even once. The apartment felt different that night. Nothing had changed physically. The flowers still sat in their vases, the drawings still brightened the fridge, the banner still announced our home in proud paper letters. But the air between rooms felt thinner, stretched tight. During dinner, Leora ate politely and quietly. She answered questions with careful short words, as if each sentence cost something. Marin is coming back. Gideon explained gently. It's just paperwork. A process to make sure you can stay officially. Leora nodded. Okay. Okay, like you understand. Gideon said softly, or okay, like you're trying to make me stop talking. Leora's fork paused. Then she said very evenly, I understand. Gideon didn't push further. He told her a story instead, one she'd asked for before, about his mother teaching him to make pancakes when he was small, how she always flipped them too early and laughed about it. Leora listened. She smiled once, but it didn't reach her eyes. That night, Gideon waited until her lamp was on, then knocked lightly at her door. Good night, he said. Good night, Leora answered, voice soft. He left the door slightly open as always. In his room, Gideon lay awake longer than he wanted to admit. Not because he thought anything terrible had happened. Marin had been respectful, measured, professional. The process was normal, healthy. So why did the quiet feel heavier? At some point, the apartment settled into its late-night hush. Gideon's eyelids finally grew heavy. He woke just after midnight to a sensation he couldn't name, a faint awareness, like the air had shifted. He got up and walked to Leora's room. The door was open wider than usual. The bed was made. Perfectly. Too perfectly. Gideon's heart sank with a cold clarity. He stepped inside, scanning the room. The notebook was gone. The pressed daisy book. The little pencil pouch. Then he saw the window unlatched, not wide open, just enough. And beneath the desk, the red backpack that had once waited under her bed was gone. Gideon moved quickly but carefully, refusing to let panic turn him clumsy. He checked the bathroom, the kitchen, the living room. Nothing. On the fridge, held by a magnet shaped like a sunflower, was a folded note written in uneven letters. I'm sorry. It's better this way. Thank you for everything. Gideon stared at the words until they blurred. Then he moved. Coat, shoes, keys, phone. He left the apartment and stepped into the night air of early spring, cool, quiet streets damp from melted snow. The city was awake in small ways, a distant taxi, a streetlight flickering, a lone person walking a dog. Gideon's mind snapped into a single track. There was one place she would go when her world felt uncertain. The park. He reached Holloway Park faster than he thought possible. The gates creaked slightly as he pushed them open. Trees swayed gently in the night breeze. The paths were darker now without snow to reflect light, but Gideon knew them by memory. Leora, he called softly, not shouting, not alarming, just sending her name into the night like a lantern. No answer. He walked deeper, scanning benches, the edges of the flower beds, the places she liked to sit. His breath came quick, not from running, but from the ache of uncertainty. Then movement. Near the same flower bed where she had once dug through snow, a small figure sat on the ground. Knees hugged close. Backpack beside her. Leora looked up as Gideon approached, eyes shining with tears she tried hard not to show. Go away, she said, voice trembling, not with fear, but with effort. Please just go away. Gideon knelt a few feet away, respecting her space. I can't, he replied quietly. Not when you're out here alone. It's better, she insisted, words spilling faster now. Better if I leave before they decide. Before someone comes and says you can't keep me. Gideon shook his head slowly. That's not what this is. You don't know, Leora said, and her voice cracked on the edges of control. She asked questions like she was looking for a way to take me. Gideon's chest tightened. He kept his tone soft, steady. She asked because she has to understand. Not to take you, to protect you. Leora stared at the ground. What if she finds someone, a name, a paper, a person? What if they say I have to go? Gideon moved closer, still careful, still respectful. Then I show them the truth, he said. That you belong here because we built it. Because you're safe. Because you're loved. Leora's eyes lifted, searching his face the way she always did, looking for cracks. Gideon gave her none. "I'm not letting you disappear," he said, each word clear. "Not into paperwork, not into confusion, not into old fears." Leora swallowed hard. "Promise." Gideon opened his arms, not rushing her, just offering. "I promise," he said, "and I keep my promises." For a moment she held herself still, balanced on the edge between leaving and staying. Then she stepped into his embrace, small arms wrapping around him, with a strength that surprised him. Gideon held her gently, firmly, like someone holding something precious without trying to own it. After a while, Leora's breathing slowed. Gideon whispered, "Let's go home." Leora nodded against his coat, and together under quiet streetlights and the first hints of spring, they walked back, one adult choosing responsibility with his whole life, and one child choosing trust, one brave step at a time. The next morning, the apartment felt steadier, like something fragile had been set back into place. Leora ate her breakfast quietly, but fully this time, feet swinging beneath the chair. Gideon sat across from her, coffee untouched, watching the way she traced small circles on the table with her finger. "I'm not leaving again," she said suddenly without looking up. Gideon nodded. "And I'm not letting the future feel like a threat." That day he made the calls he had been preparing himself for. Julian Cross, a family attorney with a calm voice and patient questions, appointments, forms, timelines, everything that turned care into commitment. In the afternoon, Maren Cole returned his call. Her tone was professional but warmer now. "We can begin temporary guardianship immediately," she said. "From there, we'll move toward adoption, if that's what you want." "It is," Gideon replied without hesitation. That evening, Gideon's father, Harland Vale, came by. The conversation was careful, measured. Concerns about responsibility, about balance, about permanence. Gideon listened. Then he spoke simply. "This isn't something I'm adding to my life. It's something that finally gave it shape." Harlan looked toward the hallway where Leora's drawings lined the wall. He said nothing for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "Then do it right," he said. "And don't do it alone." That night, Gideon found Leora in her room reading. "They're going to help make it official," he told her. She closed the book slowly. "Official means staying, yes," he said. "If you want." Leora nodded once. "I want." Family court was smaller than Gideon expected. No raised voices, no drama. Just a quiet room with polished wood and soft light filtering through tall windows. Leora sat beside him, wearing a pale blue dress, her hair neatly braided with a small white daisy tucked near her ear. She held his hand, not tightly, just enough. The judge asked simple questions. How they met. How long Leora had lived with him. How school was going. When asked if she felt safe, Leora answered clearly, "Yes." When asked if she wanted to stay, she paused, then nodded. "Here feels like where I'm meant to be." The judge smiled just slightly. Papers were signed, stamps pressed, words spoken that carried quiet weight. Temporary guardianship granted. Adoption process approved to proceed. Outside the courtroom, Gideon knelt in front of Leora. "You did great," he said. She shrugged. "I just told the truth." Julian Cross shook Gideon's hand. "We'll finish the rest soon," he said. "You're on the right path." As they walked out into the sunlight, Leora looked up at the building behind them. "It wasn't scary," she said. "No," Gideon agreed. "Sometimes important things are just calm." She thought about that as they walked home hand in hand, steps in sync. For the first time, the future didn't feel like something that might disappear overnight. It felt like something they were walking toward together. The final papers arrived on a clear spring morning. Gideon set the envelope on the kitchen table and waited until Leora finished her cereal. He didn't rush the moment. Some things deserved space. "This makes it permanent," he said gently. "It means we're family, legally, officially." Leora opened the envelope carefully, hands steady. She scanned the page, lips moving as she read. Her name was there, Leora Vale. She stared at it for a long time. I get to keep it, she asked softly. Yes, Gideon said. If you want it. She nodded. I do. They hung the certificate on the wall of her room right beside her drawings. Beneath it, she taped a new picture, a house with flowers in every window. That afternoon, as they walked home from school, Leora swung their joined hands once, then twice. Gideon, she asked. Yes. She stopped walking and looked up at him, green eyes, steady, brave. Can I call you Dad? The word landed gently, like something that had been waiting for the right place to rest. Gideon knelt, meeting her eye level. His voice was calm but full. If you want to. I want to, she said. He pulled her into a hug, not tight, not urgent, just sure. As they walked the rest of the way home, Leora skipped ahead, then turned back. Dad, she called, testing the sound. Yes, he answered. And in that simple exchange, no storm, no papers, no fear left to outrun, they both finally knew. They had found where they belonged. Did this story leave a lasting impression on you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, rate it from 1 to 10, and tap the end screen to see another heartwarming story waiting for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Until our next story.